Hi, welcome to another Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers Question of the Week video. I'm John Mark Young, and this week's question comes to us from a client who asks, John Mark, can you tell me all about Social Security? Now, that's a very broad and general question. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the month of December, and we're going to dive into Social Security in different parts and thought processes around Social Security to help you better understand this very important piece of your retirement income. Now, today's question is going to be centered around, is Social Security going bankrupt? The number one question we get is, will it be there for me when I retire? And it doesn't matter if the person is 60 and getting ready to take Social Security benefits in a few years, or if they're 30 and they essentially have an entire career in front of them. Everybody asks, will it be there for me? Is it going bankrupt? So we're going to answer that question today as part of the Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers Question of the Week. But before we answer that, let's go into a brief history of Social Security. Now, when was Social Security actually created? When did it start? Well, it was actually signed into law on August 14th of 1935. And this was almost unanimous in terms of its vote. The House voted 372 to 33 to approve Social Security, and then in the Senate approved it 77 to 6 in favor. The first Social Security benefit was paid in 1937, and in 1939, benefits extended to spouses, surviving spouses, and even minor children. Then in the 1950s and 60s, we got the first cost of living increase. It wasn't a consistent one like we have today, but it was a just one-time cost of living increase. And we had the Medicare Act, which started to provide health care benefits to beneficiaries of Social Security. Then in the 70s and 80s, we did have our first COLA, cost of living adjustment, and that was provided each year based on an annual increase in the Consumer Price Index. And then in the 1980s, President Reagan signed into law taxation of benefits. Now your Social Security benefits could be taxable up to certain amounts. Never fully, but up to certain amounts. And then in the 2000s, President Clinton ended eligibility for most non-citizens, and we will, in 2025, celebrate the 90th birthday of Social Security. Now, when Social Security started in 1937, it was not quite the program it is today. Back then, there were 52,000 beneficiaries in that range, and the total benefits we paid out were about $1.2 million. Now, I'm sure $1.2 million back then was a lot of money, but 52,000 beneficiaries received about $1.2 million. Here we are today where over 66 million beneficiaries are served from Social Security, and we pay out over $1.2 trillion. So we go from 1.2 million in the 1930s to 1.2 trillion in the 2020 decade. And even 20 years prior, we were only paying out about $400 million. So you can see how much the program has grown. Now, why has the program grown? Well, in 1935, there was about 160 workers for every one retiree. So the worker to retiree ratio, 160 to 1. And it was, designed that most people would probably not even live to collect benefits because the average life expectancy in the 1930s was under the age of 60. So designed to supplement retirement, 160 workers for every retiree, benefits were paid in the 1.2-ish million range. And the poverty rate for seniors, why this benefit was even created, was around 50%. So 50% of seniors were living in poverty because they just hadn't saved anything and were unable to work. Fast forward to today where the average life expectancy is nearly in the 80s, and so people are going to more than likely collect their benefits, and if they've saved other assets, they run the risk of potentially outliving those assets and only having Social Security there. Now, on today's average, about 40% of a retiree's income comes from Social Security, and that retiree worker ratio is, remember, it was 160 to 1 in 1935. It's 2.8 workers for every one retiree today. You can see why the numbers are getting a little wobbly, why why you can see Social Security potentially running out of money, or why people could make the arguments going bankrupt, although again, we'll talk about why it can't actually go bankrupt, is because it was 160 to 1, now it's 2.8 to 1. And again, as we talked about, the benefits paid are about $1.2 trillion. The poverty rate for seniors today is less than 10%. So we went from a 50% poverty ratio to a 10%. I would say Social Security was successful in helping to offset that. Now, the thing that you need to think about is Social Security and your 401k, IRAs, Roths are going to be your income in retirement. But if you don't do what you need to do, if you don't work the baby steps, if you don't go through baby steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and eventually get to baby step 7, then you could run the risk of being 1/3 of Americans that have saved less than $25,000 and are over the age of 55. 1/3 over 55 and saved less than $25,000. This used to not be as much of a problem. Back in 1998, for example, about 60% of Fortune 500 companies offered some sort of defined benefit plan, which is a pension. Fast forward to 2015, that's around 20%. So from 60 to 20, and today it's in the mid-teens, the amount of Fortune 500 companies that offer some sort of pension plan. So it's really on you to make sure that Social Security isn't the only benefit you get, and you're not subjected to the issues of Social Security should they become major issues. Now, when we talk about Social Security, one benefit of Social Security as it relates to an income stream is it adjusts with inflation. And that's a huge benefit because most pensions don't do that. We have a teacher's pension in one of our highest concentrated states that hasn't given a cost of living adjustment to their teachers in many, many years. And finally, for the first year, just did, but only if you had retired 5 years prior. So those that are retired in the last 5 years actually didn't get that there. But Social Security does give you a cost of living adjustment, and it's based on the CPIW. Now, if you ever listen to our What We Learned in the Markets This Week video with Sumit Puri, you'll hear him talk about the CPIW, the Consumer Price Index, which is the CPIW actually tracks urban wage earners and clerical workers, and that resulted in adjustments to people's Social Security in 2022 of 5.9%, in 2023 8.7%, in 2024 3.2%, and for 2025 will be 2.5%. So those were some pretty nice increases. Now we had some pretty nice inflation, not really nice, but it was high, and so people on Social Security were able to keep up with that because their Social Security benefit got adjusted. Now, the CPIW, is that the best way to judge inflation for retirees? Probably not. If you listen to Sumit, he'll tell you 31% of the CPIW is actually housing. We would argue the book The Happiest Retirees and the Baby Steps teach you have to be out of a mortgage payment by the time you retire. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be a happy retiree, and you're definitely not going to be living in Baby Step 7 where you want to be when you get to retirement. And so if housing is 31% of the CPIW, and most retirees, at least happy retirees, have that paid off, you're having a inflation number that is 31% that doesn't even matter because they should have their housing paid off. Medical, for example, is only 11% of the CPIW. Energy, transportation, they account for about 16% combined. Say, well, again, energy and transportation is not something that generally retirees need as much because they're retired, but medical is. And the fact that medical is only 11% maybe is, again, not the best number to use. There is a CPI number that is made for the elderly. It's a CPIE, and that reflects the spending patterns of consumers that are over the age of 60, but that is not used by the Social Security Department because the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that's just too experimental right now, even though we've been doing it for quite a few years. We've been tracking it for quite a few years there. But that's how your Social Security benefit goes up, is based on that CPIW. Now, when you think about who is actually getting Social Security benefits today, well, based on the December numbers, 75% are retired workers. 75% of people getting Social Security are retired workers. Well, then who's the rest of this? Well, Social Security also covers disabled workers. That's only 10%-ish of Social Security, so you're still only up to 85%. The rest are widowers and parents, children. So if you pass away young, your children might get benefits, and spousal benefits account for 2.9%. Their children were 5, and widowers and parents were about 5, but each a little over 5 actually there. So that's who is actually getting Social Security today. Now let's get to the question that everybody wants to spend a little bit of time on, which is Social Security going bankrupt? Well, when you think about a bankrupt company, you think about Sears. General Motors in 2009 filed bankruptcy. Still around today, a new GM, but they filed bankruptcy. What was the problem? Too much debt, not enough income to meet their expenses. The only way out of it was bankruptcy. We would say calling Social Security bankrupt is an incorrect way to characterize Social Security. It's not going bankrupt. Technically can't going bankrupt. Now, why is that? Well, because Social Security is required to balance itself. So it essentially is able to take income in, pay out expenses, and as long as those equal each other, we're fine. If they don't, there's what's called the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, as of the end of 2023, the combined asset reserves of the Social Security Trust Funds, because there's a few of them, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, and then the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, they totaled approximately about $2.79 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollars in reserves. So when money's coming in and money's going out, and there's more going out than in, the reserves form the financial backbone of the Social Security system today. It's what enables us to keep Social Security afloat when we have more going out than coming in. One of the problems with that $2.79 trillion, how much of that is invested in the stock market? None of it. By law, they're only allowed to invest in treasuries. So while that does kick out some nice interest in today's world, that they don't get the growth they need on that. That's one easy fix, in my opinion, to the Social Security system, is take a portion of that $2.79 trillion and invest it. But we have a crucial issue because in 2023, we paid out benefits of 67.1 or to 67.1 million individuals, and the total benefits paid were about $1.3 billion, showcasing how massive this program is in our economy and supporting retirees, disabled individuals, and their families. So you can't necessarily take that away, and nor do we think, again, it won't go away there because you have income. And the income was approximately $1.2 billion. That was collected from employees who contributed 6.2% of their earnings. So look on your paycheck check, if you're still working, and you're paying, should be, 6.2% of your earnings up to the maximum. And then that's matched by your employer. If you look on the employer paid benefits, you'll see that they're also paying 6.2% for a full 12.4% of your pay going to pay into Social Security. Then you also have some beneficiaries that are paying taxes on their Social Security benefits. That money actually comes back to Social Security. And so about 48% roughly of beneficiaries are paying income taxes there. And then, of course, as we talked about, there's being interest earned on the trust fund income. Again, it's only invested in treasuries, so it's not quite what we want it to be. And when you think about the financial outlook, so the fact that we're taking out more than we're putting in, so thus the trust fund, that $2.79 trillion is filling the gap. Current trust fund projections are that that will be depleted by the year 2033. Now, what does that mean then? Does it mean it's bankrupt? No. But the ability to pay is significantly reduced. So what are some potential changes that we can make to make Social Security more solvent and to make it around for all of us? Well, one obvious way is to say change the full retirement age. We've done that in the past. We haven't done it for a while, but we have done it in the past. You could move the full retirement age from what is 67 today to age 70. So, you know, if we get it later, then we get it for a less amount of time, and that helps Social Security. How about taking all of your earnings, that your working earnings, and subject them to Social Security tax? And what do I mean by that? Well, as we said, you pay 6.2%, your employer pays 6.2%. That's only up to, in 2024, $168,000 of income. So if you make more than that, you don't pay Social Security tax above that level. We've seen proposals that have stopped it at the 168 or whatever the current level is. Of course, that'll be a little bit higher for 2025, I think about 176. But we've seen them proposals where it turns back on at 400,000, and then for anyone above 400,000, you start paying that tax again. That would bring more income into the system. We've seen means testing scenarios. The way that Social Security is calculated, which we'll go through on another video in a few weeks, what we call bend points, you could change the way you calculate that for higher income earners, basically changing it to more of a welfare program. I don't advocate for that, but that is one thing that has been put on the table there. If you delay retirement past full retirement age, which is, again, today is 67 for most people, but if you delay retirement, you get delayed retirement credits of about 8% a year for a total increase of about 24%. You could decrease those. You could decrease the delayed retirement credits, therefore not paying so much more to those that wait till age 70 to take their benefits there. You could delay the eligibility. Right now, you could take as early as 62. You get a reduced benefit for that, roughly about 30% less. Maybe you delay that eligibility from 62 to 64 so that you can no longer even have the option of filing at 62. You have to wait till 64 and thus saving Social Security some payment for a few years. And you could reduce the COLA adjustments, as we talked about earlier. Is the CPIW the most effective way to do it, or should you use the CPI for elderly individuals, which has historically had less inflation? These are all potential changes, things that at some point in the near future you're going to start hearing politicians talk about because they have to. They've delayed the inevitable. We're getting close to a point where in 2033 or 2034, somewhere in that range, Social Security can only pay out about 80% of benefits if no changes are made. And so by definition, because you have money being paid in and Social Security has to balance itself, when the trust fund is out, it's not going bankrupt. You're not going to lose your benefits. You're not going to get paid nothing. Worst case scenario right now, you would get paid 80% of what you're either being paid or what you've been promised to be paid. Now, as we've talked about, with a third of people getting Social Security as their only income, what would happen if 20% of their benefits are cut? That would be disastrous for them. It would push a lot more people from the 10% of elderly that we have living in poverty today to a much higher number. That's why we think that can't happen, at least for those that are only on Social Security. Maybe if you are a baby step 7 person and you've done really well, maybe you'll be means tested out of Social Security. That's an option, but you're not going to lose it. You're not going to lose all of it. You're going to get some of it. And so that's why having a financial plan, a retirement plan, where you look at a situational Social Security estimate for yourself. And what's the best way to take it for my spouse and myself? Everybody's different. Some people want it right away. Some people want to try to maximize their benefits. There's definitely ways you can do that, at least ways we think you can intelligently. But you need a good retirement plan to take a look at the big picture, take a look at all the options, and help you make a wise decision. But be happy, friends. Social Security is not going anywhere. Again, maybe a cut coming, but it's not going anywhere. It's not going bankrupt, so you don't have to worry about not getting your benefits. You will get your benefits. Just how you will get your benefits and how much and when, that could be the question that you need to pay attention to. Certainly something we will be paying attention to. So thanks for watching this week's video. If this week's video was helpful to you, would you do us a favor? You can do us a favor by hitting the like and the subscribe button. When you hit the like button, that pushes our content out to more people on YouTube and Rumble's algorithms. And when you hit the subscribe button, our content gets pushed out to you as we release it. So thanks so much for watching this week's video. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.